Everyone knows battlefield location determines survival, yet these elite US Special Forces built their base in a valley surrounded by mountains, becoming easy targets for the Taliban. Despite being an obvious death trap, soldiers had to risk their lives to follow orders. This isn't a battlefield clash, it's blatant internal friction within the system. And the absurdity of human nature hidden behind the gunfire is even more heartbreaking than the war itself. Because in reality, who among us hasn't been that ordinary person forced onto the fire by decisions from above? The story I'm telling today has no invincible heroes, only a group of soldiers pushed step by step toward a dead end. What they were defending wasn't some strategic high ground, but rather a valley prison abandoned by their superiors. The original intention behind building the Keating outpost was simple. The US military wanted to use it to cut off the Taliban's weapons supply from Pakistan, and to build good relations with the local residents. But from the moment the location was chosen, all those efforts were doomed to be in vain. Steep mountains on three sides tightly encircled the outpost, forcing the soldiers to look up at a 90-degree angle. Every move in the company could be seen clearly. Even the kind of water the soldiers drank could be counted. This wasn't an outpost, it was a shooting range set up for the Taliban. The newly stationed soldiers immediately saw the problem and cursed the higher-ups for being out of their minds, but military orders are absolute. No matter how unreasonable the arrangement, those on the front lines could only grit their teeth and endure it. This is the most helpless reality. Leaders talk while those below struggle. One top-down decision means constant stress for the front lines. The Taliban seized the chance. From day one, snipers and mortars never stopped. This daily harassment pushed soldiers to their breaking point. If you fight back, you can't find where the enemy is. If you don't, the next shell might land right beside you. This kind of invisible pressure is even more despairing than direct combat.
We need to keep a good relationship with the locals.
The first commander was wise. He knew the terrain was unfavorable and force wasn't enough. He partnered with elders on aid to curb Taliban attacks. He brought American aid contracts to the elders, promising better lives. Moved by his sincerity, they gave up some guns. Peace seemed to have arrived. Letting down their guard, the Taliban's harassment only temporarily subsided. Ordered to return the tactical vehicle, the captain set out at night, knowing daytime travel meant certain death. Yet the unexpected still happened on the narrow winding mountain road. A drone warned of an unidentified heat source ahead, but checking revealed it was only a dead chicken. But while they were turning back, the captain along with the vehicle tumbled down the cliff and died on the spot. A life was not lost to Taliban gunfire, but to a meaningless transport mission. The second captain took over and continued his predecessor's approach, hoping to stabilize the local area through aid projects. But the aid promised by the previous captain was slow to materialize. The elders became tough, turned hostile on the spot, and the negotiations ended in discord. The Taliban's harassment intensified. To deter the enemy, the captain led young soldiers on a routine patrol. On a suspension bridge, they hit a planted Taliban bomb, killing the captain instantly. Two captains, one for peace, one for war, both died here, not for lack of skill. From the very beginning, they were strapped to a runaway car. The driver of this car was their superior far behind them, who stared at the dashboard but never cared about the cliff beneath the wheels. The arrival of the third squad leader shattered the soldiers' last remaining hope. He brought good news. As soon as he took office, Outpost July was being shut down and the soldiers could finally go home. But this hope quickly turned into despair. Because of the Afghan elections, the higher-ups postponed the closure until October and tried to placate them with a monthly subsidy of $1,000. That $1,000 was the price for 3 more months of uncertainty between life and death for the soldiers. What chilled the soldiers even more was the cowardice of this squad leader. Afraid of ending up like the two before him, he hid in the command room all day, not daring to step outside. He even relieved himself indoors, asking the soldiers to burn bottles filled with urine for him. Even with Taliban shells exploding nearby, he wouldn't order a counterattack, insisting soldiers confirm hostility before acting. With such a leader, the soldiers were silently furious. Like a real workplace, you often encounter cowardly, incompetent bosses who constantly hesitate. They steal credit for your work. You work your hardest, but you're undermined by a bad boss. An elder brought a girl's days-old corpse, demanding money and claiming she died from Outpost phosphorus shells.
You killed his daughter, Captain, with white phosphorus in the mortar attack last night.
Anyone could see it was a scam, but the captain paid $3,500 just to keep the peace. When the dog bit the elder, he shot the dog dead right there to appease them.
It's not so simple. To be bitten by a dog is extremely shameful in our culture.
This isn't forbearance, it's cowardice. It's trampling on the dignity of the soldiers. When the Taliban see such an easy target, how could they not take advantage?
I've been relieved of duty, gentlemen.
The captain's repeated actions finally came to the attention of his superiors, and he was dismissed and transferred. But what good does that do? In just 3 months, the Taliban had already figured out every detail of the outpost. The soldiers' morale had hit rock bottom, the defenses were full of holes, the cables were old and in disrepair, ammunition was in short supply, and the Afghan militia barely put in any effort. All of this set the stage for a brutal massacre. It's not just the 400 Taliban, but also the system that drove them to desperation. Have you ever had an experience like this? At work, your superior makes a wrong decision. You immediately spot the problem, but because your voice carries little weight, you can't change anything and have no choice but to carry out the order. In the end, when things go wrong, all the blame falls on you. In life, you're bound by all sorts of unreasonable rules. You can't escape even if you want to, and you have no chance to fight back. All you can do is grit your teeth and endure, watching your efforts slowly get worn away. This is the tragedy of Keating Outpost, and it's also the reality for many of us. We are not defeated by our opponents, but by the layers upon layers of systemic evil, by those who stand high above and never bother to look down at the people at the bottom. What's even more frightening is that the worst moment of this predicament created by the system has yet to come. The Taliban had quietly gathered about 400 men on the mountaintop, armed with RPGs and mortars, watching the 53 soldiers at the bottom of the valley. A massacre that had been long in the making was about to begin. These soldiers, abandoned by the system, had no... Was there a sliver of hope? That's all for Outpost Death Foreshadowing. I'm Lao Li, exploring the reality within war. We'll meet again in human nature. See you next time. The most disastrous battle for the US military. 53 men trapped at the bottom of a valley by 400 Taliban, treated like torches. The heavy machine gun was blown away, all the landmines failed, and their allies simply ran off. Everyone thought they were doomed, but in the end they used their own flesh and blood to kill 150 enemies. This twist was so unbelievable that even the director couldn't believe it.
Here!
No one could have imagined that the ultimate bloody battle at Keating Outpost would begin in the most humiliating way. At 5:50 in the morning, just as the last soldier closed his eyes, the first RPG exploded with a bang, blasting open the steel gate and sending flames soaring into the sky. Shrapnel flew everywhere, and the soldiers, jolted from their sleep, didn't even have time to put on their bulletproof vests. They rushed to the armory bare-chested. But what they didn't know was that this was only the beginning of the nightmare. 3 sides. The hills were already densely packed with people, AK-47 muzzles and RPG launchers all aimed squarely at the base. Their force of 400 men was 8 times larger than the American troops. This wasn't a battle at all, it was clearly a premeditated massacre. The soldier in charge of operating the mortar had just run out of the barracks when a sniper shot from the mountaintop struck him in the chest with a bang. He fell to the ground and stopped breathing. The mortar team didn't even get a chance to set up. The machine gunner on the Humvee reacted the fastest, grabbing the M2 heavy machine gun and unleashing a wild burst of fire, bullets raining down on the hillside like a torrent of water. But the Taliban were too many as waves kept charging. Worse, after 3 minutes, the machine gun jammed and ran dry. They then realized the supply route from the depot was blown up by an RPG. Resupply meant crossing open ground under fire, a suicide mission.
This is LS2, we're pinned down. We need more ammo, hurry, 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 kill him.
Just as everyone... Shells exploded at his feet, spraying dirt all over his face, while bullets whizzed past his ears. Several times he was knocked down by the shockwaves, but he clung tightly to the ammo box and forced his way to the Humvee. But when he lifted the cover, he found that the heavy machine gun had already been blown to scrap metal by an RPG. The barrel twisted, the body charred black. This left Carter stunned as his ammo was now useless. Then it got worse. 2 soldiers tried detonating claymores to stop the advance, but after 3 clicks, nothing happened. The broken mines failed, forcing them to use M16 grenades instead. Then using M4A1 carbines, they created overlapping fields of fire, picking off the little Karami climbing over the wall one by one. But the number of enemies kept increasing, and the blast walls were blown open by RPGs in several places. It looked like they were about to break through. At this critical moment, just as one of the soldiers was about to shoulder an anti-tank rocket launcher and try to sneak around for a surprise attack, suddenly he was shot in the head by a sniper and died instantly. The soldier saw his fallen comrade, and his anger instantly. Eye socket. He picked up his comrade's Soviet-made SVD sniper rifle, confirmed the sniper's position, lay prone on the broken wall to steady his breathing, and aimed at the hill at 12 o'clock. With a bang, the 7.62mm bullet hit its mark with a precise headshot, and the enemy sniper fell to the ground instantly. This precise headshot immediately eliminated the long-range threat, greatly relieving the pressure on the base. But the trouble wasn't over yet. The air support called in by headquarters kept getting postponed due to weather conditions, first delayed by 2 hours, then to 40 minutes. Every second of waiting meant someone might have to sacrifice their life. The Taliban's small group had already crossed the barbed wire and occupied half of the base. Some even swaggered into the barracks, attempting a close-range ambush. Seeing this, Old Luo grabbed his M41 carbine and charged forward, killing 2 people on the spot. The last one hid behind a Humvee, but Old Luo sent him back home with a single grenade blast. By this time, the base's generator had long been destroyed, communications were intermittent, and many people were already wounded. Their blood-soaked uniforms did not make a single person retreat. Old Luo gathered more than a dozen soldiers who could still fight from. Approaching the gate, they held this final line. Taliban fighters with AK-47s charged, and both sides engaged in fierce close combat. Old Luo used his M203 grenade launcher to hit enemy positions. With several loud blasts, he blew the enemies behind the rocks to pieces. Larsen's thrown grenades caused even more devastation, blasting a whole area. The squad advanced, step by step, each step treading on blood. Just as they were about to reach their limit, the roar of helicopters came from the sky. 2 AH-64 Apache attack helicopters finally arrived. Hydra 70 rockets whooshed out, bombarding the Taliban positions on the mountain with a relentless barrage. The M230 chain gun rattled as it strafed the area, instantly causing heavy Taliban casualties and forcing them to flee toward the mountaintop. Taking advantage of the chaos, Titan Larsen carried the severely wounded Mace toward the medical station. Although Mace was covered in blood, he still joked, "Are my balls okay?" This absurd moment brought a touch of humanity to the brutal battlefield. Immediately after, Hongdaji dropped a 2,000-pound bomb. With a thunderous explosion, the Taliban, billowing smoke and dust filled the air as the remaining enemies were completely routed. In this bloody battle that lasted 12 hours, the US military paid the price of 8 dead and 27 wounded, but managed to eliminate 150 Taliban fighters and held onto an outpost that should have become a death trap. But what no one expected was that the very next day, the US military personally destroyed the Keating outpost. In the end, this torch at the bottom of the valley, where 3 captains met tragic deaths and countless soldiers shed their blood, was still abandoned. Yet the figures who stood up in the face of despair, Carter's courage in risking his life to deliver ammunition, Old Lou's unwavering precision as a sniper, and the steadfast support among comrades, all became the brightest lights in this war. Who could have imagined that, with their equipment failing, allies abandoning them, and facing overwhelming odds, this group of soldiers could create a miracle? What's even more intriguing is, why was the stronghold built in such a deadly place in the first place?